with the sincerity, talk to each other about the possibilities. Otherwise, for me, a mere return to an election will be a circus and will be a recipe for surrender. For example, how do you deal with an election, with a new electoral cycle, without addressing major contradictions that have become a major debate in this country? You follow as well as I do the questions that have arisen in the political space, for which citizens need answers. These answers cannot be settled or provided by a mere election being organized as a ritual. You have heard, for example, Ugandans are concerned about the size of our parliament. That actually our parliament is too big for a small economy. And I agree. And for me, this is not a new arena. Over the last couple of years, even when I was still LOP, I talked about these reforms, including reforms that will go a long way in reducing the size of parliament to rhyme with the capacity of the nation to support a sizable, purposeful, and useful parliament. People have talked about this. How do you achieve it without meaningful constitutional reforms and electoral reforms? We have spoken about changing the form of electing members of parliament, that the current first past the post does not give the nation the kind of parliament we desire, that probably a new arrangement in the form of proportional representation will give this country a better parliament. The last census, the census for which you have gotten provisional compose the majority. As I speak, we can only guarantee the 4 regional members of parliament for the youth, and then the woman MP, for each party to with categories. You can have 50 youth MPs in parliament or even more. Same thing with women. So I think we need to confront these issues with the sincerity as a nation, and this is being corridor talk. So I am going to be leading the onslaught, at least in the parliament. I have spoken to other party platforms. Not all, but I'm still consulting, so that we join together. It's not about me. That need a new Uganda, civil society, cultural institutions, religious institutions must be offered a platform to speak to. How do you address, for example, the issue of Ugandans in diaspora who would like to have their voice heard in our elections? These are Ugandans in their thousands, if not millions, that subscribe to Uganda as home, but have no say in how the country makes a choice for leadership. Without meaningful electoral reforms, how do you guarantee their participation in the elections? These are the issues that we need to confront. I am aware of other nations in Africa in which the diaspora votes. So can the opposition run away? Can the political actors run away from the influence and impact of the diaspora and may provide a platform for their participation in the next elections? Otherwise, merely mentioning the volume of their remittances that support our small budget is not enough. We must make them an integral part of decisions in leadership in this country. And for me, it's a matter for which we must have an open conversation. How do we talk about decentralization now? We all know and agree that decentralization has actually found of activity in Parliament, which composed of rationalization of government agencies, was an admission of the failure of the form of governance, which is decentralization in part. Form of power sharing. are shared. Country is discussing corruption, where corruption has taken root, and be able to ensure that resources go to the people in their regions proportionately. People get resources depending on their contribution to the national budget, but also equalize for those regions that are still lagging behind without a proper framework. How do you go into an election? We may not achieve everything at a single go, but the opposition must lead an onslaught, must offer leadership in a honest conversation about the role of the Electoral Commission. How do you go into an election when you have a president that is in the evening of his career and life without properly discussing the transition? So, what form of transition? You remember the Dr. Lumibaiga bill that failed from the 9th Parliament, the presidential transition bill. It's high time this conversation returned on table to be part of the national conversation on how you transition from one person to the other. You witnessed an election in the UK in which a party lost, and on the same day, a transition took place. So how can we be gamblers? We're not discussing democracy and transitions. There's no doubt the NRM or Genome 7 will leave power. So should the transition be chaotic? How do we ensure in guaranteeing his power instead of appointing medical doctors and teachers? I don't understand how this is. But who is going to guarantee without a constitutional framework the way transition as a country, and guarantee that the transition will not be chaotic, and guarantee that all institutions respect the transition? We must have this conversation on table, and it does not end with us. It's not a preserve of politicians. How do you really go into another round of election cycle without guarantees on the role of the military? We all know the kind of mayhem military visited on political actors in the last election. Should we simply go back posturing as if nothing happened? As we speak now, the people who disappeared in the last election are still missing. In fact, I should inform the country that they've written to the Right Honourable Speaker about the commitments of government on the missing persons. My thinking earlier was that this was a matter that was going to be pursued by my successors, but seem to be sleeping. The same people were missing after the last election are still missing. I've written to the Speaker and I've retrieved the answer because Parliament deliberated and debated about these people, and there were decisions taken on that day, but there was no follow-up. So I want these issues. So how do you speak to these families of the missing persons? By simply telling back to go back to the booth and, participate in another round of election? Do you even remember that the day that debate took place, we were able to situate a one-dam leader at CMI, and there was conceding by government that actually they have him? So how come that dam leader is still in detention? Has never been to court? So these issues must return before we can gear up for another, circus of an election. And there must be commitment from all and sundry that the rules of the game must be respected. But most importantly, the rules must be reconstructed for all to participate. The claim of it is late must not arise. It can never be late for us to do right. I've heard people saying, no, it's late, let's first just prepare for circus. It's not late, we have time. Unless some people have their brains on holiday in some cases. But if all of us have our brains working 24/7, we have time. I am actually aware that particular drafts of reforms have been made. I recollect the Honorable Nwagaba's bill from the 10th Parliament. We can build on that. The Honorable Segona made submissions in the 9th Parliament. They are available. So it is let's talk. It's talk of the lazy and laggard. It must not be accepted. We must be warmer. We must warm up to a possibility. But all we need is to make sure that as leaders, We invoke everyone. We invite everyone to participate. Not politicians only. All stakeholders, all that are concerned with the future of this country must be given a platform to make their views felt and informed. I thank you. Probably I should respond to any questions if they're there in English before I give a brief Uganda version. But feel free to ask any question that you think is important for my attention to respond to you.
Honorable, relatively about the electoral reforms, previously the Minister of Constitutional Affairs,
Justice and Constitutional Affairs,
yeah. He said they don't have money to handle this process, and I think he was referring it to the Uganda Law Reform Commission. Do you think government is willing to take up this process?
I dare say that whoever raises the flag of money is just misleading the country. For example, did he indicate how much money he needed and it was not available? If we have money to dole out to Rocco and others, to Pineti, why not money to guarantee a constitutional order for this country? So the issue of money should not arise. Money can be found. Money is actually available. It's simply the lousy excuse, and nobody should buy into that. The Minister of Justice should not be waited for, and we are not going to wait for the Minister to act. As members of Parliament, we have a duty. Where the Minister slips on duty, the law allows us to raise private members' bills. Yep.
Mine is not about money, but it's about the tactics they have put at play. Actually, if you look at the other bill that was tabled by, that was supposed to be tabled by Honorable Kabashayi on reducing the size of Parliament, I think the excuse has been that the Law Reform Commission is scrutinizing, but it's taking ages to, get to the end. Don't you think part of your very beautiful proposals may suffer the same fate?
This is all politics stupid, as they call it. What really must be at the front is the will. As long as the country rises to make these issues pertinent and part of our national agenda, the man will be found. The law reform will act like there's no tomorrow, and whoever has the duty will act. There's nothing like a surgery there. The issues we want to rectify are well known and well documented. Besides, we're not reinventing the wheel. Others have done so. So we're talking about the will to do right, to avoid a scenario where the transition is very difficult, is chaotic, because it's inevitable. The country must transition. I have heard some actors talking about a government of national unity as part of the transition. But how do you do that without going into a conversation that is open and enable citizens to participate and speak to us about what they don't like and what they like, to avoid chaos? So those excuses are simply plastic. We're only inviting for will all actors to do right, and I think it is feasible. We have time, we have resources, we have space and knowledge to do that.
Yeah. Maybe about these electoral reforms. I remember the last time when you were at Wineis, you elaborately put them out, and they weren't received, especially by the political. Never received it passionately. The terrain has not changed. The same actors are still in those positions.
That's why I said in my submission that these reforms are not about politicians. They're about citizens and the desires of citizens. One subject them to the will of the people, and when the will people speak, then the politicians must direction from the mirror of the will of the people. When we put a small mirror in which politicians see their mouth and ears, then you can't have reforms. So we want to have a debate. That was a small room for political actors. So they must be subjected to the people. Are people satisfied with the way we function? Are people feeling secure about the transition? Are people feeling secure with the way resources are shared in this country? Do they feel involved? Do they see themselves as a part? So these are the issues that must come to the conversation. Then the actors will see the way. So we must insist. It has nothing to do. When they say they're not interested, but there are those that are interested. So how do we bring them on board? I will simply avoid
together one song of us.
going through a political ritual for the sake of an election. Mr. Kajimi, yes.
I have a question on behalf of the society. This advice when President Ruto was not concerned about if they want to remain in charge of the country. So, which is a good thing that now there is a third force in Kenya, the Kenyans who are not political aligned to any organization. So Uganda, in Ugandan perspective, seems people seem to be so detached. From even engaging in go for small things like there's money here, let's go. Community. What do you have?
I think you need to understand 40 years ago, some have always gotten grandchildren, and all their political means through contest, a contest that had been swatted variously. So it is reason to cause apathy and frustration. The political class has a duty to ignite this fire and return the interests of citizens by ensuring that they communicate hope. This conversation must communicate hope to citizens and therefore invite their involvement and participation, that tomorrow is going to be better. That if mistakes have been made in the past, the future must deposit hope and a promise to the young people. That's the message that should be filtering through these conversations. My interest is that these conversations must return to the table, and we must listen to the people, hear from them, and therefore we should be able to find our bearing. You see, the problem with the political actors is believing that they are eternal. There's no eternal political actor. We transition. This service space is not eternal. It's not ordained, and therefore we can only be performing our duty as we subsist at the moment. So, the whole issue of what we learn from Kenya and the interest of the young people there, probably our political culture is a bit different, and we need to understand that. But that should not be reason for the young people in Uganda to remain apathetic and disinterested, and only interested in picking up phones and sharing pornography and what. They should be interested. The question they ask on social media should translate into activity and active involvement in what is being done, and they should be able to ask questions and demand for answers.
Maybe if I can do these two. One, when I was starting with the electoral reforms, when the consultations starting, and then two, essentially you were in Masaka. There is a statement you made. Some people brought it the way they liked it. Could you comment on that statement about the drunkenness and marijuana consumption? Maybe people will get you right, or you prove those who got the message wrong.
Well, first of all, the consultations should begin in earnest. But I'm trying to speak to a number of stakeholders to get a framework, because it's not about my face and my personal involvement, but the interest and participation of all considered stakeholders. Probably that will be able to warm up the population to the possibilities, instead of waiting for polling day, which for me is unacceptable and something that I really think will be a very bad thing for Uganda, that is transitioning from a personal rule to a possible democracy if we engendered the requisite reforms, constitutional and electoral. Constitutional especially because the country needs a new consensus. I have said severally before that the current constitution was mutilated. it was predicated on a two-term president. It never was the wish of the framers of the Constitution that we'll have a life presidency. So the predicate has since collapsed. So the country needs a new consensus on governance, power sharing, and the rest. So that consensus must come from a consultative process in which citizens at various strata participate without limitation. Your second question, I don't think I need to really hazard a lot in trying to answer that, because we have a lot to do. And I'd rather that we concentrate on the issues that are going to add clout to our obligation in the current space. If you're going to really spend a lot of time in exchanges that do not really help us as leaders, I don't think it's very necessary. It only serves to undermine our effort as leaders, and I think going forward, we have learned from people choosing each other, this and that. We now know the idiosyncrasies, the contradictions, the biases. We know that. That should really never deter us from doing right. I'd rather that we do that. Probably the past month will enable us going forward to peel back so many layers of contradictions, ignorance, misinformation, blackmail. I'd rather that we do not really take a lot of time to go into those small side shows, because eyes must be on the ball. If we don't do that, then we are only allowing the country, we're telling people that we are preparing the country for a worst case scenario that I talked about in my preamble of self-succession and a monarchical arrangement in our constitutional order, which I detest. Thank you. Okay. Mu bufunze nabayise okweyambisa emikutu gino okwogera ku nsonga 3 mu bufunze. Esooka sifunanga mukisa mutongole kwebaza nakulisaayo bannayuganda bonna ku lw'amaka gange, ku lwa bannamasaka abatwegattako nga 21 mukulu gye twategeka okwebaza Katonda ate n'okumusaba. Abantu abatwegattako nga bannamasaka bantumye okubeebaza ate n'okubasima ddala okuwaayo obudde bwammwe ku lunaku olwali oluzibu, lunaku lwa kukola, ate abaatiniga engendo nga sibawadde transport, tubeebaza. Omutima ogwo ogw'obwa Sseruganda obwa nnyinoomu tugwebaza, era bansabye bagambe n'okubasaba mugukuume. Okusaba okumwe twatutegeka kwali kusaba mu mbeera yaffe ne mu butonde bwaffe ne mu nkuza yaffe, bubeerako n'ekikusanyusiza osaba era neweebaza, oba n'ekikusoomooza era okola kyekimu. N'olwekyo twebaza abatwegattako ku lunaku olwo mu bungi obwo, ate n'okubeera abantu ab'emirembe obwenkanidde awo. Ensonga ey'okubiri era nga eva ku mukolo ogwo, bukyatuvaayo bannayuganda bangi Ssekinnoomu mu bibiina ebyobwannakyewa eby'ebyobufuzi, bannamawulire badde bankubira nga bambuuza wakola statement naye tuwatuule engeri gy'ogenda kugenda nayo mu maaso ku biki ebirina okukolebwa nakyo ekiddako. Ensonga ya kiki ekiddako ndowooza yebadde kutaakati. Kyenjala okubagamba nti bukyanvaayo nagenda mu maaso, jatumala omukolo ogwo nagenda mu maaso okusinkana abantu bangi, ndowooza buli lunaku nsinkana abantu ab'ebika ebyenjawulo ebisukka 10 buli lunaku olukya, naye nga ndi mu kwebuuza, si kwebuuza ku lwange nti nyina kyempisaawo, naye okwebuuza kubanga obuvunanyizibwa bwe nnyina mu makkati g'abannayuganda mbumanyi era mbutegeera bulungi, ate sinze nabwe essaamu bwe babunteekamu. Okwebuuza ku biki ebisoboka. Tusigazizza ebbanga lya mwaka gumu n'emyezi nga bwe gityo okubanga twesanga mu kiseera ekyokulonda obukulembeze obupya mu Uganda ku mitendera egy'enjawulo. Ensonga eyo nagikoonako naye ne ŋŋamba nti okubeera okwayo kijja kuba kya bunafu nnyo ffe abaagala okukyusa Uganda, ogenda obugenzi mu kalulu ng'omukolo obukolo ogwakiyita mu lujja twabaddeyo akalulu twaketabyemu twafunyeyo ababaka ba palamenti netufunayo bammeya ne bakansala tuli basanyufu nnyo ndoza si kyekigendwa ky'ebyobufuzi ekyobwebange ekigendwa ky'ebyobufuzi kukyusa bulamu bw'abantu kukyusa ndowooza z'abantu nakulaba nti eggwanga likuumibwa nga lina emirembe nga ne bannansi bagenda mu maaso ate ng'obuyinza bwabwe babusigazizza okwebuza okugenda mu maaso kuli ku nsonga enkulu bbiri okulaba nti situgenda mu kalulu akaddako nga situfunye ssemateeka mupya nga situgenda mu kalulu oyinza okugamba ssemateeka omupya oba ennongoosereza ez'omuggundu mu ssemateeka aliwo kubanga ssemateeka aliwo nzikiriza nti yatemwatemu obulere bwebeera nnyumba basooka kugjamu luggi ne bajjamu amadirisa oyinza okugamba nti wetwogerera kifulukwa ekifulukwa ekyo tosobola gamba nti mujja kuyingira bikonkome misota na minya na bikere kubanga emyaganya weeyiri okusobola okuddabo ssemateeka yakolebwa mu 95 yakolebwanga ennonooye ya president agenda okumala ebisanja 2 yatwaliwo okwerumaaluma nti ne bwobeera mu byotya ebisanja 2 webiggwerako yatuba tukoze eki tuba tukuwonye tibalowoozaako nti bajja kubeerawo omuntu akwata obuyinza agambe nti nze okutuusa okufa amiina ekyo kasatu ajjawo ebisanja kuba president oyo ssemateeka okwo okukkanya kw'abannayuganda abaali mu ssemateeka abakola ssemateeka oyo kuba kuyiise kubanga eyo yempaji enkulu eyawakati Sseddugge eyali yeesibye ssemateeka oyo bwetunulira n'ennyanjula ya ssemateeka ffe bannayuganda abayise mu busambattuko omuli okuyiwa omusaayi omuli obwa Sologumba omuli obwaki ebigambo bingi nnyo kitegeeza nti abakola ssemateeka baali bakoze okwebuulirira okwo kulabika kwatyoboolwa abaagala Uganda egende mu maaso ng'ekola n'ebyobufuzi ebisibaga ssemateeka ow'abaana n'abazzukulu ssemateeka alina okuddamu okutuulirwa eyo ensonga esooka ayogere ku bintu bingi nnyo omuli ebisanja omuli ogabana obuyinza tukkiriza nti enkola ya decentralization eri ku ssaawa eno yasigala ku lupapula naye mu nkola yayiika enkola y'emirimu nfu entambuza y'ensimbi nfu abasasula abo ensimbi ennyingi mu musolo bebafuna ate ekitono ennyo mu musolo tukakasa tutya nti ensimbi y'omusolo eganyirwa abo abagiwa ebitundu ebisigalidde nti biyambibwa okugenda mu maaso ng'okyalina ssemateeka ayogera ku decentralization efaanako bwetyo nga teriemu na garanti nti osobola okuwulira omukulembeze w'eggwanga oba ssaabaminisita ng'ali wantu n'agamba nti mmwe mwalonda bubi abeeyo kyemudde mutafuna services kiba kitegeeza waliwo ekizibu ennyo mu ngabana y'obuyinza n'enkola y'emirimu so ensonga ezo n'endala zeetaagisa okuzzaayo mu lukale bannayuganda baweebwa omukisa ebbanga liiseewo ddene okuddamu okutunulira bye baagala bikyuke mu ndagaano yaabwe kubanga ssemateeka ndagaano y'abannayuganda so si ndagaano y'abannabyabufuzi ekyokubiri ensonga nnyingi zikwata ku byokulonda ekimu ku biri mu ssemateeka bye ndowooza nti birina okuteesebwa kasana genda ku kyakubiri ye palamenti ebbanga lino palamenti ekubiddwamu nnyo tooki emu mu butuufu ate endala mu butamanya ekyo kino kirekera bannayuganda babe nga babuuza ebibuuzo bafune answers kasaba bange kibabuuza kirina omusingi nga tekisibagiddwa mu bukyayi nange eridembe tosobola libajjako palamenti ya Uganda bagyemulugunyizaako ababaka bangi nnyo abagasa batono. Sera kituuse tuze ku mmeeza size ya parliament n'ennunda yaayo. Bawadde ekyokulabirako nti abavubuka mu kubala abantu okuwedde kizuuliddwa nti abavubuka myaka 17 ku 25 basinga obungi. Naye mu parliament mulimu bameka? Mu constitution eriwo n'enkola eriwo abavubuka osobola bawaggala nti ababaka 5 bana abava mu buli kitundu ate n'omuwala owa Uganda yonna. Kiba kitegeeza nti abantu abasinga obungi ate bakiikirirwa kitono. Mu nkola ennuŋŋamu singa ababaka balondebwa okusinziira ku bungi, kyetuyita proportional representation, tusobola okukola etteeka eriwaliiza buli kibiina kuba ne percentage y'ababaka nga bavubuka. Mu nkola ero tusobola kiwako garanti. N'abakyala bwe batyo. So ndowooza okubaganya ebirowoozo, debate ku nsonga ya parliament nga bwefaanana ne baani abagirimu yalwawo dda. Ababaka b'amagye bakyakola ki mu parliament? Ezo ensonga zeetaaga zikubaganyizibweko. Kujje gyetwogerwa eritugambibwa nti kali liri professional, abaka bakyakola muki. Lwaki b'amagye? Lwaki si ba prisoners? Lwaki si ba police? Lwaki si ba LDU? Bwetuba bakunyweza demokrasia agoberera amateeka ate nga tugamba nti tulina civilian government, eyo debate eryetaaga ekomewo. Parliament erimu ebintu bingi nnyo ebyetaaga okukyusa bwe basobola ofuna obukadde 3 obuwumbi 3 ne tubuwa omuntu omu agende atereze bizinesi ye. Basobola kunoonya buwumbi 5 kukola amateeka aganaakuma abaana n'abazzukulu n'okusigaza essuubi ly'Abannayuganda nti Uganda ejja kukyusa obukulembeze esigale ng'etambula nga tewaliwo mbeera yonna yaddukadduka. Mu kiseera kino tetusobola kugamba nti tugende mu kalulu kubanga tukaagala nnyo nga tukatwalanga mukolo nga n'ebizibu ebyaliwo mu kalulu akaggwa tebinnaba kuvaawo ng'ekibuzaawo bantu. Njagala kubategeeza nti nawandiikidde sipiika nga munjukiriza parliament bye yasalawo nga nkyali loopu ku bantu abaabulawo, abantu abaabuzibwawo, ensonga ezaali mu kutyoboola eddembe ly'obuntu ku myalo, ensonga z'abasibe abali mu makomera nga tebawoza. Mujjukira bulungi parliament yatuula n'esalawo eggoye ku nsonga ezo mu motions 3 daleeta ku floor ya parliament. Era mujjukira bulungi nti mu debate eyo omu ku basibe be twazuula yali Ddamulira, gwe twazuula nti ali ku CMI. Kyakakasibwa yakyuka eddembe ly'obuntu akamukyala wangadya poliisi n'ekikakasa. Mujjukira statement ya mwami Onyango n'amabaluwa agava mu State House binanga biri mu Parliament ku ssaawa eno ddamulira family yetu gigambe nti tuli bajega tuli bagwagwa tetutegeera nga Parliament yateesa n'emuzuula nti ali ku CMI nga tavanga yo tagenda nga na mu kooti akyali mu busibe ate abantu bananyini b'abasibe bano abalala tubagambe nti badde balonde nga abantu bakyali mu kkomera ffe tuli mu bwangu twagala kulonda. So ensonga ezo n'endala zikomewo gwe mulimo gwendiko nkyaguliko noonya enkola ennungamu ne bannange nkyebuuza ne kubansingako ku bukulu ne ku experience mu bino nsonga zino tukikwate tutya waliwo n'abatakyagala abalowooza nti kijja kubalwisa kye baliko. Sirowooza nti waliwo okulwa, twetaaga ddoboozi ly'abannayuganda bonna, si abannabyabufuzi bokka naye buli muntu alina omugabo mu ggwanga muno eddoboozi lye liwulirwe. Kyakusaalirwa nti minisita wa ssemateeka ensonga eno yogerako bwogezi emunyumirwa okwogerako naye egyokugisa mu nkola simanyi kimuganye. Ekirungi nti amateeka agafuga Parliament tekatugaana kuleeta bago nga basi kinoomu obanga group. Ekyo mu mbeera eriwo tunama tukoze okwebuuza okumala kutwagala okukola mu bwangu kyetwagala tubeereko era njagala okuyita bannayuganda bonna abavubuka abantu abalina ebirowoozo tunaba tubayise nze maze okukola okwebuuza okutonotono ku baka ba paalamenti nja kukola betugenda okukola enkola ennungamu eyawamu okukolagana ne bannayuganda bina byobwannakyewa ebyo byobufuzi okulaba nti tukola okwebuuza okw'eggwanga lyonna ku nsonga ezirina okukyuka ate mu bwangu ddala tubale kye tujjamu tuleke genda mu kalulu kakutuusa mukolo obanga mukolo bukolo gwakwalula balongo